The Specialist Phil and Will are back, and we are here to recap the Traitors episode number 4. We saw at the beginning here one of our Survivor favorites go home, and then we saw a Survivor favorite just run circles around some people here at the end, Will. So a lot to talk about with this episode of the Traitors. The boot list was looking weak to start. I am a little bummed that Bob the Drag Queen is gone. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of disappointing. He was awesome. But what are you grabbing from this episode as we start off live here?
Brutal boot list, as you mentioned. And maybe not for everybody who's watching, but obviously we are first and foremost a Survivor podcast. And so to have like Jeremy and Tony both be gone this early in the season and at the doing of Rob, essentially, which makes no sense. I really think this is like some of the worst gameplay we've ever seen from Boston Rob on any of the shows he's ever played on. And he's not
including the round table.
Sure. I mean, okay. I think what we saw from Wes at the end is how could he be so sure unless he was a traitor? And, part of it might be that Boston Rob knows that he is such a big threat and has a target on his back. This isn't Deal or No Deal Island where people didn't really know who he was. He had one person know who he was, like Aaron, and then he became best friends and, had a very strong alliance with that person. Mm-hmm. Here we have a group of people who are reality TV stars who have been on these shows before, many of them on game shows like The Challenge, Big Brother, Survivor, all that. So he knows he can't come in and not have a threat. He can't shed the threat of the Survivor king that people seem to be calling him, although Tony is far more, in a way, a king than Rob ever will be. And so it might be that Rob's like, you know what? I'm a traitor. Honestly, might have been part of his deal to come on the show. Like, I'm only going to come on if I'm a traitor. I'm going to have as much fun with this. Mm-hmm. Leave the bloodiest and messiest path possible while I'm on the show. Messiest path possible while he's on the show, knowing he can't win, and just have fun with it and be entertaining and make good TV. There is part of me that really believes that, because having Jeremy and Tony go, and that being, a big part due to Rob, it makes no sense if he was playing this strategically to win the game, despite what he did with Bob.
I have a couple things to say. First, I want to give credit because I don't want to come across negative, but I'm going to make my statements here. But I have to say, that was probably the most entertaining episode of the Traitors we've had. Like, it was unbelievably entertaining to watch Boston Rob go at Bob the Drag Queen, have Dylan be like, oh my God, we did it. Like, and everybody be so stoked. And it takes a player like Wes, who's played these games 7 million times, to turn around and say, of course he knew everything. He's done this before, and he's a traitor. Like, he's probably a traitor. So that's great. I mean, it was unbelievably entertaining. I'm going to talk about the entertainment value. I do think that Boston Rob came into this game and wanted to vote out Tony and Jeremy at any opportunity he got because of Winners at War. I'm sorry. I truly believe that it was part of his agenda going out into this castle, that if he had the opportunity to get rid of the player who is considered the greatest of all time at Survivor and a Survivor winner who made it much deeper than him on Winners at War, he was going to take the opportunity to do it as almost a gotcha, maybe I'm still better than you, even though obviously this game is way different than Survivor. I don't think he gave a crap. I think he knows he doesn't have a chance to win. And I think he's totally fine with, as long as I beat the other Survivor winners, that's all I care about. And he did that. And I don't think he cares otherwise. And then he goes so hard after Bob the Drag Queen. But with Tony and Jeremy going, it sucks. And Tony said it in his exit press. He's like, I would have never voted out Boston Rob. If he would have just kept me around until the end, he's walking out of there a winner, because I would have never gotten rid of him, even though he was a traitor, because I was just like, good, we're Survivor buddies. Let's do it together. But Boston Rob doesn't care about that. He just wants to beat the winners from Winners at War. So I don't know how you feel about that, but that's exactly where I feel this way.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes even more sense given Rob's threat level. And if he acknowledges that he doesn't have a chance to make it all the way to the end and win because he's such a threat, whether he's a faithful or a traitor, then that would become a pretty obvious goal, which is a bit of a shame, not only because we love Jeremy and Tony and we don't see enough of them. We've seen way more of Boston Rob. We just had him kind of be the sole main character on Deal or No Deal Island last season. But it's also a shame because you want to see players in any game play to win the game. Like you want to see optimal gameplay that results in optimal results. Does that make sense? Like you want to see players play in a way that will net them positive results. And Rob is not playing that way. Now, it might be entertaining. This was entertaining. The roundtable was great. But yeah, the boot list is brutal because not only did we lose Jamie and Tony, we, like you said, we lost Bob the drag queen, who was a star of this show. Over the first 4 episodes, he was probably the main character, I would say.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. And it's a bummer to lose Bob the drag queen. It's fun to see him go out the way he went out. But also, like, we had talked about this, I think, a little bit last season, because who was going after Phaedra? You said somebody was going after Phaedra. Who was going after Phaedra last season?
No, Giesling went after Phaedra.
That's right. Dan Giesling.
Dan was getting so much heat, and he's like, I've been quiet. I'm going to take my one shot. And when I take my shot, I'm going to be right because I'm gathering all the evidence. A little bit different, but yes, he went after
Phaedra. It's somewhat similar, but we had talked about, are the traitors allowed to directly call out the other traitors? Because when they take the oath, they're told, like, you will never unveil who your other traitor is. Boston Rob, I mean, just took that oath and rolled it up and lit it on fire because he just went and totally attacked. So what is the rule there? Because even Bob the drag queen after was like, it's just good gameplay. I'm not mad.
Yeah, no, there's a big distinction between what Boston Rob did tonight and what Dan did last season than what the oath is meaning. The oath means you can't give away the secrets of the show and say, yeah, like if Bob was like, yeah, Rob, I'm a traitor because you're a traitor too. We're both traitors. And you know that. Like that is not okay. Because now you're unveiling your role in someone else's and you're unveiling you can throw suspicion and you can accuse a fellow traitor of being a traitor as long as your evidence isn't, well, I know he is because I'm one too.
Yeah.
Like that can't be
a good point. Yeah.
Or if Bob tonight, when he gets banished, goes to the circle of truth and on his way, you better get Rob next because Rob's a traitor. He's a traitor with me. That is not cool, obviously. That's against the rules. So that is the spirit of the rule. And there's no rule saying that you cannot try to build a coalition to banish another traitor.
Yeah, and that makes sense because that's what I was worried at the end. I'm like, Bob the drag queen goes up there to announce that he's a traitor. Is he going to then say, and so is Rob? Which, like you said, that's breaking the rule of the game. Right. That's ruining the fun. That's, you got to be gagged a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was fun. And what is funny about it is somebody like Wes. I mean, you just had Wes on House of Villains. Wes is on everything, right? Wes goes all over the place. Before Wes goes on his show, he's going to study up. He's going to watch everything that he needed to see. So, he sat down, he watched the first 2 seasons, and he watched Dan try to pull this on Phaedra. And then he turns around and he sees Rob do this to Bob the drag queen. And he's like, of course, this is the gameplay that makes sense. Like, Dan was considered one of the all-time greats at Big Brother. Boston Rob is considered one of the all-time greats at Survivor. It makes sense they would use the same type of strategy here. And for Wes to just sit there and see it happen, it makes sense that he would be the one who can call it out while everybody else is just like, oh my God, typical Boston Rob. Like, I love how afterwards they're praising him like, oh, of course, Mr. Survivor. Of course he figures it out. It's like, he didn't do anything. Like, he didn't have to figure anything out. He just was able to get everybody to lump on and pile on, which having Dylan there really helped amplify that, obviously.
Dylan was the cog in this, and it was really Dylan and Dolores too. Them coming together early in the episode, saying they're pretty sure it's Bob. They just don't have the numbers. Yeah. And then Boston Rob was able to kind of, coalesce the votes together, but not good for Rob's game. I mean, we heard what Wes said. Rob is not long for this season.
No, but he never was, right?
But but he never was. So might as well go out swinging and make good TV while doing it. So I don't fault Rob. I just wish he wouldn't have come in with goals that weren't winning.
Yeah, I agree.
And outlasting Jeremy and Tony definitely feels like a goal.
Those were his goals. That was Jerry wanting to outlast Colby in All Stars. Like, I will do whatever it takes. I do not care. Good, I beat her. Beat him. Moving on. And it sucks because, especially with Jeremy here, by getting rid of Jeremy, you put the target squarely on your back because it's like, well, they're going to have one of the survivors be it. And they probably aren't going to pick Carolyn, which, again, great job by the producers to pick Carolyn. But nobody's looking at Carolyn as a potential threat here. So if you get rid of Jeremy after getting rid of Tony, everybody's going to be like, well, it's probably Boston Rob. And now that that's out there and it's in the open after Boston Rob did this right here, like, he's he's done. He's absolutely done. Maybe he makes it 2 more episodes.
I don't even know, but it seems like from the preview, preview for next week seems like it is Boston Rob against the world.
Yeah.
He's going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat if he wants to continue even past 1 more episode.
Because Danielle doesn't want to work with him. She's pissed off. She wanted to get rid of Nikki at this episode and keep Bob the Drag Queen 1 more. Carolyn doesn't feel good about the Jeremy boot, which makes sense because, a lot of times, like, we know that Tony, Boston Rob, and Jeremy were all on the same island together. We know they're winners, so there's like a kindred spirit, a kinship there. But a lot of people might not understand why is Carolyn so emotional. When Carolyn's going to these events and stuff and Jeremy's there, I mean, that's something when you're a Survivor player. It's the same as if you're a fan and you go to meet somebody who's a Survivor player. That's going to be really cool. But if you're a Survivor player and one of the elites, one of the Rushmore-esque players like a Jeremy, a Tony, whatever, come up and talk to you and like know who you are and are impressed with what you're doing, that means a lot to you. So I could understand why Carolyn was having a hard time with this because I know Jeremy was somebody who supported her throughout her season. So I understand that, but again, they just won't listen to Carolyn. And I think it's working to her benefit because they won't listen to her. And now everybody's on Danielle. People are on to Boston Rob. Bob, the drag queen, is gone. And nobody has said Carolyn's name because nothing that is happening would make sense for Carolyn. And they all know that. And I actually think it's working out really well for her.
Yeah, and honestly, Carolyn's best move in this game is going to be to keep Boston Rob around as long as possible because if they kill Boston Rob and he's proven to be a traitor, Carolyn's in the clear too. So maybe not. So, I mean, Carolyn was dealt a very good hand. Doesn't mean she's not playing well, but she got dealt probably the best hand possible. You have someone from your franchise also being a traitor with you who is now at the forefront of getting suspicion. So if he goes, Carolyn's gonna be like, yeah, all right, Jeremy and Tony weren't traitors. Boston Rob was. There you go. You're only gonna have 1 Survivor traitor. You're sure as hell not gonna have 2.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look at that, right, everybody's on a Danielle as well. So let's say Boston Rob goes. Let's say Danielle goes. Once Boston Rob goes, the pressure's off Derek and Wes. And then if Danielle were to go after that, the pressure's really off of Derek, who's now playing the game. So like it's working out for the game players, even though we're seeing a lot of the game players go out early here. I think this boot order is actually working out for some of the quieter. It's working out for Derek in one way, but it's definitely working out for Carolyn because she's a traitor and she needs the target off her back. But it's just interesting to see how it goes because let's say Boston Rob does go. I mean, we're going to have to talk about recruitments and stuff like that. Let's say they did recruit a Derek or somebody like that. If Boston Rob goes, nobody's looking at Derek because Derek came in at the same time as Boston Rob, and you're not going to expect 2 of the 3 people who came in to both be traitors.
Yeah, I do imagine that Wes or Derek will get recruited. It makes the most sense. Depending, I mean, if the current traders, whoever they are, we don't know who they'll be, that would be the wisest move. I would love to see Wes as a trader because Wes gets it.
Do you think that they're going to recruit right away, or do you think that there's going to be a lapse? Because they didn't mention a recruitment at the end of this episode, which I feel like they might have. They normally would have, wouldn't they?
I don't think there'll be a recruitment. I think you start with 4, see how long they last. And I don't think you would recruit unless you got down to 2 pretty early. If you make it to 2 traders or 3 traders deep into the game, if there's 11 people left and you have 3 traders, we might not see a recruitment all season. But
like if Boston Rob goes next week, though, you think that they're recruiting right after?
Yes, I think they're recruiting pretty soon once they get down to 2. And if it's this early in the season. Like if we have episode 4 and episode 5 both leading to banishments of traitors, then yes, I think we're going to get a recruit, or maybe they'll have a new mechanic in how it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious how that's going to go for sure. And we'll dive into that a little bit more, I guess. What did you think? So let's go back to the beginning of the episode.
Yes.
Now we've talked about everything else. Let's talk about the beginning. So we have the coffin situation and they go into the bookcase room and then there's the 3 people who lay down in the coffins. What did you think about the way the coffin room thing was handled? And what did you think about the 3 people who were thrown in after all this? So I want to hear what you think about how this shook out.
This whole coffin song and dance reminded me a lot of the cages, that cage challenge we saw in episode 1, where it's like, all right, we're just going to lower these cages and collect coins in the forest. And Wes, Derek, and Boston Rob are all coming into the game. Foregone conclusion.
Mhm.
and we dressed it up and made a segment out of it. This felt like, okay, we're heading into season 3. What was one of the most popular events of season 2? It was the poisoning with the chalice.
Mhm.
That was easily one of the biggest highlights of season 2. And it felt here that they're like, okay, let's come up with some creative and new ways that the traitors are forced to murder. That is beyond just going to the turret and having a conversation and then writing someone's name down. How can we spruce that up? How can we make that different?
Mhm.
I don't know if we needed this. Feels like I don't know if we needed this. I think the most interesting part about it was going to the bookcase and needing to secretly congregate. I'm still not sure how much I buy how difficult that was. I don't know if the show would risk.
I mean, they're all claiming they heard Danielle.
Yeah, no, it's at some point, but we don't know if that was later when Danielle was in there with Dylan. Like, people could have been in interviews, they could have been sequestered in some way, they could have been having a meal time in a tent outside, they could have been getting ready in there. Who knows what production hacks could be happening? It just feels very unlikely to me that the show would risk all 4 traitors getting caught at once. It just doesn't sit right with me that the show would risk that. And hey, maybe they get caught and then, okay, what happens next? Then they all get banished, and you can only banish one traitor at a time, and you're at this foregone conclusion. Like, let's say Gabby goes in there. Just play with me here for a second, Phil. She goes into the bookcase because she hears Danielle's voice, and it's Danielle, Carolyn, Boston Rob, and Bob the drag queen. What happens with this show? I think Gabby goes and tells everybody, the 4 people that were there, and like, even if she catches them writing on a scroll, like, there are so many ways this goes south. And then, like I just said, you can only banish one traitor at a time. So now you're just, every week, it's like, we know it's these 4. We know it's these 4. And we have a boring streak of episodes. And you have some of your biggest characters. Think about who these traitors are, who they pick. Boston Rob, Carolyn, Bob the drag queen, Danielle to a lesser extent. So I'm not sure I buy it as much as I buy the chalice. I think the chalice works so well because there was this real belief that Parvati could get caught. And it was only her that had to do it. It wasn't all 3 of them getting together and doing something where all 3 could get caught. And it's something that you can do way more subtly. This was not subtle. No. Going into a room while everyone is out and just being like, all right, you 4 go away, and people are free to walk around. I'm not sure what they did to help the traitors through this, but they had to have done something. So that part for me would have been the most interesting if it didn't feel like they got some help from production or it felt a little bit contrived. Hey, and I could be wrong. Maybe they just pulled this off. I could be wrong. I do think they got the interview bite from Gabby about Danielle's voice when Danielle was in there with Dylan. That's what I think. And they cleverly edited it to make it seem like she got caught when all 4 were in there. Okay, so that's that part of it. The next part, I guess the coffin, what we're getting from it is now we have suspicion on Nikki and Sierra.
Which I actually like.
Do you, though? Because
I do.
There's a couple parts of it where I'm like, okay, we're just throwing the traitors a bone. We're giving them free suspicion points that they didn't earn whatsoever, which is not as interesting as when traitors are able to throw suspicion on other people by, the means of their own social game and gaming abilities. Just like we talk about in Survivor, it's way more fun when a big move is made without an advantage. And when players are given advantages, it doesn't feel as compelling. So I kind of feel that way here. They didn't earn any suspicion. They just kind of were given a great setup here with this coffin segment, and they got free suspicion by no kind of skill of their own. And then the next part is like, at the end of the day, here's what we did. The traitors came together. They talked about a few people they wanted to nominate, which is what they do anyway. And then they decided one of them to kill, which is what they do anyway. So I wasn't like thrilled by this. And then we gave the traitors extra points, basically. We gave them this like suspicion cushion out of nowhere. So I can't say that like it wasn't a flop. It's not broken. It's just, this doesn't hold a candle to the chalice whatsoever.
No, it doesn't hold a candle to the chalice at all. What I appreciated about this is that they're trying to mix it up a little bit rather than just, and look, they did the chalice last season, but let's not talk about the chalice. I just like the idea of different ways of them murdering. If they just constantly go up to the turret and they murder one person and that person gets it and they all go in and they're waiting for breakfast, one person doesn't come in, whatever, and then it's this, that, whatever. What I liked about this is it put pressure on the traitors to make good selections, to make a selection that made sense to put in the coffins next to Jeremy. You know you're going to kill Jeremy, but to pick Nikki and to pick Sierra, it puts suspicion on them, but it didn't put so much suspicion on them that people were willing to vote for them over Bob the Drag Queen when the argument came out against Bob the Drag Queen. Now, had you put Wes in there, I actually think you might have been able to pull that off. Had you put somebody, I don't know, like Robin, who maybe the name was coming up a little bit. If you put Tom in there, who everybody's confused and scared of at this point, I think you have a chance. But it puts the pressure on them where you're essentially saying to everybody else, we are going to kill one of these people. But did we put up two people that you would actually believe are traitors? And I think after the way this episode shook out, especially, I don't think anybody's really going to believe that Nikki or Sierra are traitors after this. I think that it was a mess up by the traitors to put those two people and kill Jeremy. I think you kill one of the others and keep Jeremy, and Jeremy probably gets the votes tonight at the banishment roundtable. But I think that this was a mistake, and that's why I'm okay with it, though. You're making the traitors do more than just sit down, write a name down, and then go in and try to point fingers at other people. You are actually putting a little pressure on them to make the correct decision, and they didn't tonight.
Yeah, no, and I like the novelty, and I like that it's new. I don't think doing something new for the sake of doing it new is always a good thing. Like, if it's new and good, then yeah. But if it's new and meh, then I don't think that just because it's new means it's necessarily better. I mean, it's almost like saying, well, I wish in Survivor, instead of tribal council, they would eliminate people in different ways. Instead of going to vote, let's do or die at the Final 7 immunity challenge. It's like, whoa. That's like the format of the show. That's the game. People have to vote each other out. That's the fabric of Survivor. And so when you break format like this, it should be pretty damn compelling and good. And I don't know really if it was. I don't have any problem with the traitors going to the turret and deciding in secret. Like, that's the show. So I don't
the show, but I think you can mix it up a little.
I do know, and I appreciate a mix up. I just don't know if this was like, this didn't knock my socks off. I don't really need to see it again. We've seen people in coffins too on so many shows. For whatever reason, network executives love when you pitch, okay, we're going to put them in a coffin. They go, oh my God, no way. That's so scary. It's like, okay, yeah, there's like a light in a GoPro and an AD being like, you okay? Can you breathe through this hole that we put right here? Are you good? They're like, yeah, we're fine. We're on a TV show. We're fine. The coffin doesn't do much for me.
Or is he out? Do we know?
No, the nail was put in the coffin. Jeremy died.
Jeremy's dead. And nobody's heard from Jeremy Collins.
No. They actually undid the nails and then filmed the confessional where he cried, and then they put him back in the coffin, and then Bob the drag queen came back and then nailed it shut, and he's been put to the ground.
Yeah,
sad to see him go.
Yeah, he was good. I like Jeremy a lot.
Me too.
I just think mixing up the format is good for this show, because I do think that this show has the ability to get stale. Whereas like with Survivor, you're voting somebody off every time. It's just one person too. I think this show has two elements that are always there, which is the banishment roundtable and is the people in the turret. It takes up a large portion of your show. We'll talk about the challenges because they are doing a better job, I feel, this season. But when you have those two things taking up a large portion of your show, you're also seeing them each 10 times in a season. That's a lot. So I'm okay with mixing it up, and I feel like this was a pretty harmless mix-up this early in the season.
But we saw them in the bookcase room just like we would see them in the turret.
Yeah, the bookcase room was dumb. I'm more talking about the actual structure of the three coffins I was more into, because I think they made mistakes picking the three people they did, which let the traitors slip up a little bit.
Yeah, no, all the traitor selections have been terrible this season. Yeah. We explained a lot of them through Boston Rob's pettiness. But even before Boston Rob got there, with killing Dorinda as the first person, I mean, from Danielle and Bob the Drag Queen, that was a pretty horrendous choice too.
Yeah, they're making Carolyn look like the brilliant one in this situation. I'm not saying she's not. It's just funny because on Survivor, she had her smart moments, but she was always seen as kind of the sidekick to Jam Jam and Carson. And now here we are, and it's like every time they make a decision, she's like, "This is stupid. I hate this. Why are we doing this?" And I love that we're getting that from Carolyn because Carolyn was, I mean, we always talk about the birdcage. The birdcage in 44 might be the best part of that season. And Danny didn't think to do that, but Carolyn did. That's awesome. And I feel like Carolyn right now is like, just because I'm zany doesn't mean I'm stupid. Would you guys understand that, please, for the love of God? They don't understand that. They're just totally disregarding her. And like I said, it's actually working for her. So good for her. Keep going, Carolyn. Keep being ignored.
Were you surprised that there was no discussion of we think it's a Survivor player or we think it's a housewife? We didn't get any of that tonight. Especially after Jamie goes, I'm like, someone's killing all the Survivor players. Like, I don't know. It just surprised me because that's such a big talking point on this show usually.
Do you think that was in there, but they figured they could tell the story without it at least this early, and they decided to cut it because it was the dominant conversation last season? Maybe they were trying not to just repeat it.
Potentially. Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a thought. It's also something if it becomes important for the story of an episode, you can easily just call back and be like, oh yeah, Tony went and then Jeremy went, 2 Survivor players back to back. So, or at least they're gone. So,
and I feel like that could be the conversation next episode is Wes brings up, well, it's probably Boston Rob because he was so confident that it was Bob the drag queen. Everybody's like, well, yeah, there's got to be a Survivor player and it's not Carolyn. So
exactly. I really would be surprised if Boston Rob survives unless I remember last season they did that weird something with candles and fire and basically gave the traitors safety from banishment. Do you remember that? It was at some point when Parv and Phaedra were completely, one of them, and maybe it was Parv, was completely dead to rights, and then she was gifted what do we even call it? Like a life token or something.
Dude, I don't remember. It's crazy because we talked about this season, but I didn't rewatch it. I didn't think about it. The Traitors comes around. I think about when it's on. I don't remember that at all.
You don't remember that? Because
no, you're probably right. I just don't remember it.
We were in a situation where the Traitors were so like they were just completely figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like 3 episodes in a row. I was like, wait, the Traitors can never have gone home because they like skipped the banishment one week and they gave immunity tokens the next week. It was like, okay.
Nate LaRocca says it was the safety chain with fire.
Chain of fire. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
The safety chain with fire. I love that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then this comes from Kevin Hernandez, highly unrealistic. But if the next 2 boots are Robert Carolyn, would you still watch? Like, yeah, I would. Like, I'm bummed that Tony and Jeremy are gone, but this episode was still wildly entertaining even without them. Like, I'd still.
Well, and we have a podcast to do.
Yeah, I know. We're not going away. I mean, hey, people actually listen to us talk the Traitors. We built our way in. We don't have a
choice. So
yeah, I know. Thank you to everybody who listened. I got to say that. I mean,
I forgot about that. I forgot that we had a podcast about it.
That's what he's talking. You think that's what
he was referencing? He definitely wasn't talking about the safety chain of fire.
No, I appreciate that though. Our premiere episode of this was more views than we got on anything from last season. So good for us, good for everybody. Thanks
for the Traitors.
Thanks for sticking around. Yeah, good for the Traitors. It was the highest watched streaming show ever. I think the premiere episode for this.
Not ever. No way.
It was something ridiculous. I don't know. Probably not ever.
There's no way. Netflix has to hold all those.
Oh, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, I guess streaming on whatever. Just look it up. You'll see it. It's on there.
Netflix is a streamer. I don't know.
No, I know. You'll find it. It's on there. I think it's like a live show. I don't know. Look it up. They said something and it was good. All right. Let's see what else. Okay, let's talk challenges real quick. And then I'm going to get to Thomas McGee's question here about Dylan's brother because Will doesn't go on social media, so he doesn't even know about the Mike Bloom versus Derek feud that was going on Twitter, where Derek is just such a tool. Like he's just wild guy.
What's happened? Well, explain it to me. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen that aren't like glued to Twitter. So this one was pretty big. It's pretty funny too. I mean, Derek just took it as wildly out of context as he possibly could.
just because. I mean, I don't know. Blake says he has a big ego. I believe it after this. I gotta see if I can find the entire thing. But essentially, oh yeah. So Mike Bloom tweeted out, Bob the drag queen has gone toe to toe with the likes of Derek Barry and Plain Jane. Now he faces the next big rival, Zac Efron's brother. You offended by that?
No.
Okay, Derek retweets it and said his name is Dylan. He's a really good person and actually playing a pretty good game so far. So let's at least respect him enough to call him by his name when you're fishing for likes. And then people start going at Derek, being like, you're an idiot. Mike Bloom does all this stuff. Like even Survivor players were like standing up for him. And he's just doubling down on like pretty much calling Mike Bloom a dumbass. So Derek, screw you.
I mean, I could see Mike Bloom, I think, is being tongue in cheek with that.
He's making a joke, but Derek doesn't understand humor, I guess.
Yeah, he's pointing out that we should call him by his name by not calling him by his name. That's the whole point of the joke and the tweet. And it went over Derek's head, but I think Derek probably is doing this out of like from a good place. Like,
nah, he was going after that. He was getting a little personal with Bloom.
Oh, okay.
And it was just stupid. I mean, it was dumb. And like the thing is, why did Dylan Efron get cast on this? Because he's Zac Efron's brother. So that's the joke that Bloom is making. And Derek not doing his own research.
No, he was he was on that show, A Really Good Guy or something.
And Derek not doing his own research.
Down to earth.
Bloom, who's putting so much work into figuring out like behind the scenes of who Dylan really is and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was just tool stuff. And he was like, Derek was like, I just think people who are putting themselves out there deserve to be called by their name, especially if they're the punchline of a joke. He said that to Teeny. And it's like, dude, like, it's not that serious. Grow up, dude. Like, it's not a big deal.
No, I think that's just a giant whoosh right there.
Yeah. Alan, here you go. Derek has been known to be a weirdo outside of these shows when it comes to social media. I mean, it's like, you're not going to shut down all of social media, whatever. So that's what's going on with that. So that's why if you keep seeing this, like Thomas McGee, who says, Phil and Will, what do you all think of Zac Efron, Dylan's brother? Is he a good actor? So what do you think?
Yeah.
He got called out by Bob the drag queen for no reason tonight. Just
and I honestly think if there were some people on the fence about where their vote was going, if they were going to go Nikki or Sierra based on the coffin, and like Bob's like, yeah, I don't really think it's Bob. When Bob threw out that Zac Efron's not a good actor, I'm sure that raised a red flag. You're like, Bob the drag queen is riled up and would probably only throw shade at Zac Efron if he was a traitor and just losing it. So at least to me, that's kind of, when he said that, I'm like, oh, he's a goner. Like he's not surviving this episode.
Yeah. And clearly he has not seen the Iron Claw, right? I mean, he won a bunch of awards for that. Like Zac Efron. I mean, everybody loved him in that movie. I mean, sure, High School Musical.
What about Baywatch?
What about Neighbors?
Yeah, Neighbors, Baywatch.
Classic. To name drop Baywatch there.
Baywatch is a classic. People hate that movie for no reason.
That's a Will movie if I've ever seen one. That's for sure.
No, I like Piranha 3D.
Piranha 3D is great. But that was really leaning into the hokiness and all of that. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, catch Will up on all the drama that's going on. So if he's like, why is everybody saying Zac Efron's brother? Now it's very tongue in cheek because it wasn't that big of a deal. And I don't know why Derek, it might have come from a good place, but he was just too negative about Bloom and he's trying to attack the kids. Like, go.
Can't go at Mike Bloom.
There's literally, like, if you're going to go at anybody, that's the one person in the community you don't go at. And Bloom, like, just responded with happiness and kindness. And, like, then you got Rob Sesternino, like, trolling the crap out of Derek, which is always fun, too. So, love that. Love it. It was fun to see everybody unite against this guy whose name I will forget after 3 weeks from now. But anyway.
I think Derek's honestly playing a pretty strong game, though.
He's not doing anything, which is the smart move when you
come
in.
Traitors game. Yeah,
it is. Do you think he's going to get into trouble the way Dan did?
Well, he's not a traitor, so there's not much trouble he can get in unless
they can banish him.
I guess no one's looking at him right now. I think we were talking about the Traitors' decisions, not to jump all the way back to that, but Boston Rob were confused why he was, trying to get Tony out last week at the banishment, really throwing fuel onto that fire. and then deciding to murder Jeremy or go along with the murder of Jeremy. It seemed like it was suggested by Danielle. That's not his strategy, but maybe his strategy is I came into this game with Derek and Wes. I need to keep them two in the game as long as possible, because if Derek or Wes get banished or murdered, then they're not traitors, and it's revealed to everybody, which then you get even more eyes. So you have the survivor thing, and then you get this like 3 new guys thing. So that might be the way Rob's playing this instead of going the survivor route.
Yeah, and that makes sense because there's no way that none of the people who came in late and none of the survivors are traitors. Like that's 6 people. One of them out of the 22 people or whatever people there are going to be a traitor. One of them. So it's smart of Rob, but yeah, it's interesting to see what Derek will ultimately end up doing here. If he'll get louder, if he'll try to be a little bit more loud. I mean, he did make his statement tonight at the round table. Like he wasn't like Dan just sitting there like comatose. He did try to make a statement.
He said some things and then backed off and then voted, kept to his guns. Wes did something very similar. And that I think is a pretty good strategy. Don't linger on it. Don't be so gung-ho or so certain. Just be like, here's the evidence I've collected. I don't know if I'm right. Could be right. Probably wrong. Taking a shot in the dark here. Let's give this a go. Here are my points. This is what I'm doing. And then zip your lips, listen. And I think that's probably the optimal way to play.
And here's James Barber. I like this point of people being questioned in jail using loud profanities when getting defensive. And then Sierra's response opened up with a loud F-bomb. And then everybody just goes, that's how Sierra talks.
Because they got to hang out a little bit before the first roundtable where Alan tapped the shoulders of the traitors, and they probably caught on to her profanity before that. Derek did not have that opportunity.
He did not. That is true. So I mean, it makes his argument was sound. But do you think now, and I do want to talk about the challenges, but since we got back to the roundtable, do you think that the people who didn't vote for Bob the Drag Queen are going to be in any type of trouble now? Like Wes votes for Nikki, a couple people voted for Nikki, a couple people voted for Sierra. Do you think any of them are going to look extra suspicious here coming out?
It's
like Derek
possible.
Voted for, who did he vote for? Sierra or Nikki?
Sierra.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Wes voted for Nikki. It's possible. I mean, that's some of the you have very little information in this game. And one of the only tangible objective pieces of info is the voting record from everybody. And so it might not come out yet, but 3 or 4 banishments down the line, if you're tracking who's voting which way, and it seems that there are people that keep not voting traitors, and say they do get Boston Rob and someone doesn't vote for him, you can be like, you didn't vote for Bob the Drag Queen, you didn't vote for Boston Rob. What's going on?
Yeah. You got to vote right at the next one. Let's talk about these challenges before we talk about who we think they might target next week. So this challenge, all of a sudden it's for money, but by putting the pieces together, if your head gets placed onto the statue, you get a shield and are safe from the next murder. I don't know how you feel about this, but these are huge improvements to why I should watch this challenge. All of a sudden, watching the challenges is worth it. And I want to just praise the Traitors for doing this right now, because look, they're the #1 watch streaming show, whatever the number was ever. They're doing their thing. They're
more than Squid Game.
It's working. That's the point I'm making. It's working. They're doing a great job. And yet they're realizing that they have format issues, that there were problems with the show that eventually would make it stale, that eventually would turn off some of the more casual viewers. And they've made necessary changes. And I think this is a great change. So far, the challenges, with the exception of the clown thing, which didn't work, and which some people said in the UK version, they did so well and 5 teams made it through or something like that. They are making the challenges matter to the players and to the audience, which is not what could be said the last 2 seasons. And that's huge. And I love that we're getting the strategy of who's going to carry this up, who feels that they need the shield. Everybody feels that they need the shield. Can we just strategize? Why aren't we taking the time? It actually creates a dynamic that is necessary for these challenges, because only some people are being protected while the others are getting left out in the cold. And that's good. We need that on the show. And tonight we had 10 people end up being safe. So 10 people cannot be murdered. Good. I like that you're playing for some form of immunity in these games because it gives them purpose other than, cool, you got $20,000. I do not care about that.
Yes. This challenge was a huge improvement. I loved the first challenge, and it was kind of a similar type of setup. And hopefully this doesn't become repetitive where it's like, oh, we just have people deciding. The whole group has to decide. It was a little bit different because you could individually just pick up a thing and put it on. Yeah. I like when these players are forced into decisions, and these are social decisions as well as physical ones. So I really like, this was probably better than almost every single Traitors challenge except for probably 2 or 3.
Except for probably the one in episode 1 of this season.
Episode 1 of this season, and maybe a couple. We talked about some good ones that have been in the past where they did involve shields. Mm-hmm. Yet, and I want to praise the Traitors for fixing the challenges. Mm-hmm. Big kudos, because this is 20 times better. Yeah. And this conceptually on paper is so fantastic, and it's so simple. And kudos whoever came up with it. I don't think maybe the players didn't play it correctly, or maybe it fell through in post-production, because I don't know if it was edited to be as compelling as I wish it would be. We didn't see that much contention up at the top of whose head was going on. And then at the end, they just flashed 10 names. And I'm like, well, how did Rob get ahead on there? I mean, I know Tom just solo ran his up.
Yep.
Waited. We got some description of people who were just waiting up there with their heads. Once the body came up, they just did it, which is character building. You see who's selfish. You see he's not. There's a little bit of that. I'm not saying this was a bad challenge by any means. I'm just saying once I heard the description of it, I'm like, this is going to be juicy. This is going to be really good. There's going to be contention at the top there, and we're going to be going down to our fake timer, 45 minutes, and it's going to be like, whose head goes on? Whose head goes on? And are we going to have a vote? Are we going to? And it just, I don't know if it delivered on the promise of what I thought we'd get out of it, if that makes sense. And that's no fault to the game design. It might not even be fault in the editing. They might have just edited the way they have, because the players that didn't get shields did not do much fighting for not having shields. Maybe that is on the players and not so much on the game design.
I think that's one fair point. I also think that the show was 1 hour and 7 minutes tonight, which was long, right? I was surprised it was that long. I do think that the show is, with the changes it's making to the challenge, it now has to show a different portion of the challenges, a different part of the challenges than it was showing previously in previous seasons. They might be learning what they need to do, that they can still get a banishment, that they can still get the turret ceremony, whatever you want to call it, and that they can still get the challenge and show the parts of the challenge that matter. So I do think there's some growing pains here where maybe this challenge was a little ahead of its time, and maybe they allotted time to the wrong things in this episode because they're still trying to figure out, okay, what could we have shown that would have heightened drama? And obviously with how tonight's banishment roundtable went, that had to be 10 minutes of the show. There was no way they were going to make that any shorter because of Boston Rob versus Bob the Drag Queen versus Dylan, with Derek making his statement. Those statements were all massive. And so for me, it's like, in a week, in a season, like you go to next season, they do the same challenge. They are showing you more of everybody yelling at each other as they're going up and down the hill. Everybody's screaming at you, no, I'm not taking yours. Like, push it, like being like, I'm just going to hold on to the body then. I'm not even going to put it down. I could see people doing more of that there, and the editors knowing how to show that better, because I do think there was probably, they were showing a lot of the audio. It was a lot of, hey, people yelling while they were just putting a head in anyway. And I think that maybe there was something like lost on the cutting room floor that might have been a little bit juicier than what we saw.
I don't know. I think if there was contention, you would immediately like build a segment around that. Like you would include it, because that is the goal of this game design, is to have people fight over who's putting their head on the statue. Mm-hmm. I do think it comes down to the players not fighting that hard, which that can happen on a show where you're casting reality TV stars. Yeah. If this was 20 people, random Americans, like a Survivor cast, you better believe people are fighting over whose head goes on. And that's sometimes just, that's how the cookie crumbles when you cast these like, pseudo celebrities who have big followings, who have franchises, and they get paid a lot of money. And so like, they're not as motivated to get through. I mean, some of them obviously are, but some are like, hey, I'm here. I get to dress up and go to a castle, and this is a fun little game. My head's not up there. It's not a big deal. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it could go either way, but I'm just happy with the direction they're moving. There's a purpose to it. The people are actually like, I think the arguments and the drama will come. We saw it in the first episode. That one really worked. You had a player like Tony who was taking it very seriously. You had people saying, well, I don't want to sit out. Why is it always the women who are sitting out? You had Danielle and Bob, the drag queen, go over the top with it. I do think that I think that they're on the right direction, which is what's so important.
Definitely.
The challenge.
Definitely. This is a great design game. It's a great game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So praise there for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting into this episode ends. We know Danielle is fuming. She's ready to go at Boston Rob. Carolyn's not super happy with it, but we'll see what happens. What's your prediction for who they're actually going to murder here? What do you think the reaction is going to be, and who's going to have the power now?
Do we have a list of we had 10 shields. Do we have
That was something I was going to say. They needed to put that up. They needed
and that's what I mean, where it's like we just flashed the names at the end. If we had seen each head go on and be like, if there's a moment for each one of those, it would have felt more impactful, because we're sitting here doing a podcast on this and we're like, wait, who's even eligible to be murdered? Like, we don't even, and maybe that's part of it too. Like 10 names is a lot. Like maybe do like 6 or 5, and then it's like each one becomes monumental. Or maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, because the fewer shields there are, the less important a shield is. You know, if there's 15 shields, then only like 2 people are eligible to be murdered, and so the shields become more important. So maybe 10 is that right spot. We just didn't get these moments of like, okay, ding, ding, like this person has a shield, or they get a confessional about it. I'm sleeping well tonight. Like, we just needed to hit each of those.
Rob did have a confessional did have a shield next to his name during the confessional. So there were shields next to the names, but I think what's missing here is when they go in to do the murder, and next week will be the murder, and so they could still do this. They need a list of eligible to be murdered at the bottom of the screen that we as an audience can look at, because that's really hard to keep track of.
Yes, and this episode was an hour 7 tonight, and we didn't even get the usual traitors meet up to murder. That's usually what we end the show on. And if we had gotten that scene, we could be sitting here and be like, okay, they talked about it's one of these 3 people, and then we could make our predictions. But right now, I'm like, I can't even tell you. The only one who I know for sure doesn't have a shield is Derek. And I don't think
Derek does not have a shield.
And I don't think Boston Rob wants Derek to go, as I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
So I don't know. Is there a way? Is that on Twitter anywhere? Is that?
I'm looking right now. I'm trying to. So if my internet can't handle loading this, I know we were having trouble earlier when we were recording some Patreon stuff. So let's hope that doesn't happen here. But if it does, you just keep talking. I'm trying to pull up here.
I'm going to try to go to. It's probably on Reddit, I imagine.
Who has shields?
The traitors.
The traitors. Yeah. So I'm looking, and the Wikipedia is not updated yet.
Okay. Is this episode for discussion thread? Can somebody please?
Oh, wait. Here we go. I got it, Will. I got it. It is on here. Bob Harper. Bob the drag queen who is dead. Brittany, Chriselle, Danielle, Dolores, Dylan, Rob, Tom, and Wes.
I would probably kill Chriselle.
No, she has a shield.
Oh, those are the people with the shield.
Yeah, so the people who don't have a
tell
shield.
Me who's eligible to be murdered.
Well, now that's not on my list. So hold on. So it's Sierra.
Gosh, now we got to do
Sierra, Derek, Gabby, Ivar, Nikki, Robin, Sam, and that's it. So 7 people.
I would kill Sam or Gabby. Because Sam is not really doing anything. I don't think people suspect him. And your goal as a traitor is to kill the person who is most likely to be faithful. That's your goal. Or you can kill someone who's getting on to you, like sniffing you out. And that would be Gabby.
Yeah, Gabby would make sense here. What about Ivar? You think there's any reason to kill Ivar?
I think Boston Rob likes that Ivar went along with his plan. It seemed like Ivar was brought in, and after Boston Rob talked to Dylan and Dolores, he went to Ivar, and that was kind of the next. It's another reason to keep, like, even if you have the most obvious faithful, there's another reason to keep them in is if you're a traitor and you're working with them. Like Boston Rob is not going to let Dylan get killed.
Yeah. So Tom and Wes both voted for Nikki. You can't kill them. Now, Gabby, Nikki, and Robin all voted for Sierra. So those are the only people who voted for Sierra: Gabby, Nikki, and Robin, and Derek. So Derek's eligible to be voted for, Nikki's eligible to be voted for, and Robin's eligible to be voted for. But do you try to keep the people who voted wrong here to make them look like traitors? You probably do, right? You try to keep the people like Derek, who was really pushing, saying, I think this is who it is, because that makes them look a little sketchy. You don't murder one of the people who voted for Sierra.
You want to murder someone who is not drawing any suspicion to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like Derek, you could argue, has suspicion because he made a case and was wrong. And it can be like he's just trying to say anything and he doesn't get accused of being too silent. You don't want to kill Dylan. Yeah, I mean, I think
Sam would be the one.
Sam or Gabby, I think would be your.
But Gabby did vote Sierra, so that's what I'm saying. Like, if you wanted to kill somebody who voted correctly, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, no, that's a good way of thinking about it. It's weird though. I don't know if the players, I'm sure the good ones are, like they don't have notepads and notebooks.
Yeah.
So then maybe they have their phones on them and right off the round tables, I know they type out who voted for who. But like voting history is so important that I'm sure Wes is keeping track of who everyone voted for, like in his brain, and then logs it somewhere. I'm sure there's a quick way you can do it.
Well, and I also think, Will, like you have to think about it. If you're playing a game like this, which we've played many of them, if you tell everybody, hey, let's vote this way, and I say to you, Will, we're going to vote for, Blake, and then you don't vote for Blake, I'm going to notice that, especially if everybody else I told to vote for Blake voted for Blake, so I think that's where it's probably helping Wes and everything.
Yeah,
he knows who else voted with him.
And you can just pretty much only remember the people who voted incorrectly, which is often going to be the majority of people. Like usually you get, Tony, it was like almost everyone voted Tony last week. So you only had to remember 4 or 5 people. And then here, this was a pretty overwhelming Bob the Drag Queen boot. So you only have to remember a little more tonight to remember, but at least those correct votes, you just forget about those and you're not tracking like all other 18 or 17 people every time.
Exactly. That's a good point. So yeah, I would bet Sam. That's what my guess would be. I would bet that they go for somebody who voted for Bob the Drag Queen to make it look like the people who voted for Sierra and Nikki might still be a little suspicious, might be trying to protect them. You can keep the scent off, but at the end of the day, I think we both agree Boston Rob's probably getting banished in episode 5.
Unless the show throws him a bone, we get a chain of safety, firepower, Star Wars, excitable, twisty, I don't know.
Hey, it could happen.
The
Whatever
show
word you just said could happen. Yeah. We'll see. You got anything else for this episode, or are we done?
I think we about covered it. Yeah.
We did a really good job. We pat ourselves on the back. We covered a Twitter feud. We covered everything that happened in the episode. That was it. That's all we need to cover. We figured out who had shields. That was the big thing.
Yeah, because the show didn't tell us.
Because the show barely told us.
It didn't tell us enough.
Remember to have that up, guys, when you sit down to watch next week, but don't go to that Wikipedia page too late. Otherwise, they're already going to tell you who's been voted and who's been murdered. So, because they update like right away. So you got to be careful on your timing here.
You got to screenshot it now and then refer back to the screenshot of the episode. So you don't have to broach the internet live with spoilers.
Yeah, it is interesting because then it says it's going to start at 9. And then I think they dropped it. I was looking at Mike Bloom's tweets. It was like 8:35. It dropped. It's like, what are we doing? You're not even close to 9. You're not even trying at this point. So, we'll be back next Thursday, though.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying because it's like I don't want to just sit at my laptop refreshing from like 8:35 onward, not knowing when it's going to drop. So it's like, I don't know, like just have a time and release it so I can I don't want to waste my time waiting.
Well, and I will say, it seems like from the people who are watching live right now, it seems like they probably are appreciative that we waited till 10:15 because they actually have time to, if they don't think it starts till 9, a lot of people aren't going to start this till 9. because they're not sitting there refreshing Twitter like you and me might, or, you know, at least refreshing
I'm
whatever.
not. Definitely not.
Yeah. But like whatever we're refreshing, you know, I think that, you know, people are probably happy that we waited a little bit. So maybe we'll just keep waiting.
Yeah.
You know, we'll do 10, 10, 15, but we'll see. Anyway, we will be back next Thursday to do episode number 5. Blake and I are doing Deal or No Deal Island on Tuesdays. If you haven't checked out our last episode, go ahead and check that one out. Parvati, David, Dr. Will finally came into the game. And we'll be doing that on Tuesday, probably in the afternoon at some point. Thank you all so much for listening. Or actually, no, we've been doing those on Wednesday. The episode's on Tuesday. What am I talking about? So we'll be back on Wednesday.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Become a patron, patreon.com/a-specialist. Just finished up our recording for Fiji. So January 27th is the last day of Fiji talk. And then we start talking Survivor China.
Fiji's not that bad.
It's not. We discovered
it's a bad rap. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to hear us talk about Fiji and the legacy of Fiji and why people are just wrong about the legacy of Fiji, check it out. Also, Will, I don't know if you know this or not, but I just want to give you a quick shout out here. So this episode number 4 of the Traitors, do you know where you were recording episode number 4 of season 2 of the Traitors?
I believe now that because I was thinking about it, and I didn't know what episode it was, but I did one of them from like an airport. Like
you were
from
in
a
the
terminal.
Airport. On
with
January
like the noises,
19th,
flashing announcements, like delays, people walking by. So
yep. You were in the airport. So good job, Will. Proud of you for doing that. Just want to give you your flowers when you need them every now and then here. There you go. Thank you guys. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.